When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. It was a small smile, the kind you wear so your heart does not fall apart all at once. I walked to the door with that smile, and I closed it as softly as I could, as if a door could learn to be kind when people could not. I held my old handbag a little tighter and told myself I had seen the worst of days, and this was not one of them. That night I sat by my window and let the city move without me. I watched the slow lights on the street. I watched my breath make a faint cloud on the glass where I leaned. I thought about the first time I met her parents. I thought about the dress I chose on purpose. I thought about pretending to be a woman I had already survived. I will tell you how it started. I will tell you what I did and why I did it and what it cost me. I will tell you the moment truth arrived and changed the room. But before that, I will tell you about my son. Because this story begins with love, it always does. My name is Miriam. I have one son. His name is Daniel. When he was 7, he used to stand on a chair to help me wash dishes. His small hands would disappear into the sink and come back with plates that slipped like fish. He would look at me with wide eyes, ready to apologize. I would laugh and say, if a plate breaks, it just means we were eating. He grew up in steam and sun and the smell of ginger. I worked as a cook in a school canteen for many years. I learned how to make rice that did not stick, even when the rice was old. I learned how to stretch spices on days when the budget was thin. I learned to make every child feel like they had enough, even on days when there wasn't much. At noon, when the school hallways went quiet, I sat on a stool with a small notebook and a pencil. I wrote my lists neatly. Oil, ginger. 2 sacks of rice if the price is fair. Neatness made me feel like I could hold the world steady, even if it wanted to shake. The canteen smelled like onions and soap. It smelled like work and care. Daniel was a quiet boy. Not shy, just careful. He saved his words and used them when they mattered. He watched before he jumped. He listened before he spoke. As he grew, he learned to carry his backpack high on his shoulders. He learned to leave food for someone else if there was not enough. He learned that kindness is not loud. When he finished his studies, he found work in a small office. He would come home with stories about emails and numbers and coffee that never tasted as good as it smelled. He would put his bag on the table and rub his shoulders. I would press my thumbs into the tight places and he would sigh and say, "You always know where it hurts, Ma." Years passed. The days began to run like a soft stream. I kept my habits. I cleaned on Mondays and washed sheets on Tuesdays. I kept coins in a jar for bus fares and bread. I kept a tin box for small things that mattered more than they looked. A bracelet my mother gave me. A bus pass worn thin by years. A photograph of Daniel missing a tooth. That tin box was where I stored proof that love is work and work is love. Then one day, Daniel met a woman named Lena. He said her name like a new word he had learned and wanted to say again. He brought her to see me on a rainy afternoon. She stepped in and shook her umbrella on the mat. Her smile was quick, like a match in the dark. She said, "Hello, Auntie," though I am his mother, not aunt. It was a small slip. I saw Daniel's eyes flick to me worried. I smiled. "Hello," I said. "Come in." I poured tea and set out bread. We sat at my small kitchen table. Lena wore a neat blouse and a watch that caught the light when she moved her hand. She looked at me with careful eyes. She said, "Daniel says you make the best ginger soup." I laughed. "He is a good son." "He exaggerates." She smiled and folded her hands as if she was reminding herself not to touch too much. We spoke about small things. The rain tapped the window like fingers. She told me about her work and her parents' shop. She told me they were careful people, responsible people, always on time, always prepared. She smiled easily, but I saw tiredness in her eyes that she hid with practice. We all hide something that way. When they left, Daniel hugged me longer than usual. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "She is polite, she is tired, she is trying." He laughed softly. "She is a good person," he said. I nodded. Then that is enough for now. Weeks turned to months. Lena came often. She brought pastries that looked too pretty to eat. She tried to wash dishes and I stopped her. "Guests do not wash," I said. "Sit and talk." She would argue a little. Then she would sit. She told me about her mother who liked tables set just so. She told me about her father who checked the locks twice before bed. I told her about Daniel at 7, at 10, at 13, when he stood taller than me and still needed a hug. One evening, Daniel told me he wanted to marry her. The words sat on the table between us like a warm loaf of bread. He looked both scared and sure. I saw the boy on the chair at the sink and the man at my table with tired shoulders. I said, "If she is your choice, she is my choice." He closed his eyes for a second like a man exhaling a held breath. "Her parents want to meet you," he said. I nodded. Of course. I knew what first meetings can be. Doors can smile while people do not. Tables can be set with forks and knives and also with judgment. I have lived long enough to know when rooms measure you before you sit. I told myself I would go with an open heart. Then I did something I do not defend now, though I understand why I did it. On the morning of the visit, I stood in front of my small wardrobe. I touched one dress, then another. I chose the old dress with the faded flowers. I chose the shoes with the scuffed toes. I clipped my hair with the plain clip. I picked up my old handbag, the one with the loose thread that hangs like a small tail. I looked in the mirror and said, "Let them meet the version of me that is easy to dismiss. Let us see what they do." It was not a lie. I am not a rich woman. I have lived simple. But I made myself smaller than I am. I wore my weakness like a costume. I wanted to test their kindness. I wanted to see if they would look at a person, not a dress. I told myself it was wise. Now I call it what it was, a small deception that cost me something soft inside. On the bus, I sat by the window and watched the city roll by. A mother lifted a child with sticky hands onto a seat. A man slept with his head against the glass and his mouth open. A woman stood steady without holding the rail. The driver leaned on the horn once and then sighed as if even the horn was tired. I clutched the strap of my bag and thought of Daniel as a boy, standing on the chair, trusting that I would steady him if he slipped. We reached their neighborhood. The buildings were tall and glassy. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and cold air. Daniel waited for me by the door and put his hand on my elbow. "You okay, Ma?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I am okay." The elevator doors opened like a book and we stepped in. I watched the numbers light up, 345. My reflection in the steel door looked older than I felt that morning. I smoothed my dress and told the reflection, "Do not be afraid." The door opened to a hallway with quiet carpet and soft lights. We walked to their door. Daniel rang the bell. I could hear the quick steps of someone coming. The door opened and there stood Lena's mother. Her smile was practiced, tight at the edges as if she had ironed it flat. "Welcome," she said. "Please come in." Her eyes moved over me quickly like a cashier scanning items. Then they moved away. Lena's father came from the hallway, straightening his cuffs. He shook my hand with 2 fingers and put his hands in his pockets right after. People who put their hands in their pockets like to hold on to control. He said, "Good afternoon," as if talking to the room. "Good afternoon," I said. "Thank you for inviting me." The living room was pale and tidy. The pictures on the wall showed neat rows of faces. A graduation, a family trip, a wedding that was not theirs. There were no mismatched frames. There were no marks on the wall where chairs had rubbed. The air was scented with something light and expensive. I sat on the edge of the couch. I placed my handbag beside me. The loose thread caught on the cushion and I pulled it free slowly, like a person untangling a thought she did not want to share. Lena sat near her mother. Daniel sat near me. The father asked about my work. I told him I cooked at a school canteen for many years and that I had retired last year. He nodded like a man listening to a weather report that did not affect him. He asked where I lived. I told him I rented the second floor of a small house near the market. He nodded again, slower, as if I had confirmed something he had already decided. He asked if Daniel's father would be coming to the wedding. I said, "He passed away when Daniel was small." The room tilted a little. The mother pressed her lips together. "I am sorry," she said, in the way people say sorry when they want to be correct. "It was not cold, it was not warm, it was enough to pass." We spoke about the wedding. We spoke about the guest list and the flower colors. The father spoke about practical things. The mother spoke about tasteful things. Daniel took small sips of water and watched me gently, as if watching a pot ready to turn the heat down if it boiled. Lena looked between us like a bridge trying to hold 2 roads. At one point, the mother looked at my shoes. "I hope you are comfortable," she said. "We can provide a driver for you on the day if needed." Her voice was even. I told myself to accept it as kindness. "Thank you," I said. "I usually take the bus. It teaches me patience." Lena laughed quickly. The father laughed too, a short sound like a cough. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. I squeezed back to say, "I am all right." They offered tea. The cups were thin and white. The mother held hers without drinking, as if cups were props to complete a scene. I took a careful sip and placed mine back on the saucer quietly. I did not want to be the person who chipped a cup that had been counted. The mother stood. "We should move to the dining table," she said. "The food will be simple." I smiled. "The simple ones are the hardest to do well." She tilted her head, almost amused, almost not. We walked to the table. The plates were plain white. The napkins stood up in little fans like tiny birds. My chair waited at the side, not at the end. I stopped a second to see if anyone would place me. No one did. I chose a seat and sat. I have lived in rooms where I had to place myself carefully to stay safe. They served soup first. It was clear and fragrant. The mother poured it into bowls without spilling a drop. She placed one in front of me and said, "It's a simple recipe." "Simple is not easy," I said and meant it. She gave a small nod, like she was accepting a point made in a debate. Conversations flickered like candlelight. The father spoke about a shipment arriving late and how he had managed it. He used words I did not know, but I nodded. Lena spoke about a dress fitting that did not feel right. Daniel said little. He looked at me often. He wanted to protect me from something he could not name. We began to talk about who would do what for the wedding. The father leaned forward and tapped the table with one finger. "We will take care of the larger items," he said. "The venue, the caterer, the band." The mother added, "Yes." We want things to be presentable. We have certain standards. She looked at my dress when she said the last word. It was a glance like a thin knife. I sat up a little straighter. I placed my spoon down. I thought of my tin box. I thought of the paper that proved I had done more than cook and clean and count coins. I did not take it out. I breathed. I told myself, you chose to come here small. Stay steady. A cousin came late and slipped into a chair with a smile that turned into a smirk when she saw my handbag. She said, almost to herself, but with the air, vintage is brave. The others gave small smiles, lips without eyes. Daniel looked down at his soup. My face warmed, not from shame, but from the work of being still and not spilling myself on the table. We finished the soup. The mother stood and took plates to the kitchen. Please let me help, I said. Oh no, you are a guest, she said, but she did not stop me when I picked up a dishcloth and wiped the counter. The kitchen was bright and clean. The sink shone like a mirror. There was a small clip of bills on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon. I looked away. A person's refrigerator door can tell you things you did not ask to know. Lena came beside me and lowered her voice. Sorry if my mom is, I don't know, she said. She looked like she wanted to be loyal in two directions at once. It's all right, I said. Being between people is heavy. You are strong. She let out a breath, and it sounded like a window opening. Then I heard the mother's voice bounce off the tile. She spoke softly, but kitchens hold sound. Sometimes we marry up, she said to Lena. Sometimes we marry down. The important thing is to keep our dignity. She did not look at me, but her words walked over to where I stood and sat beside me like a stranger who does not ask before taking a chair. I placed the cloth over the faucet and stepped out to the balcony. The air was cool. The city lights blinked like steady breathing. I stood there and told myself, you wanted to test their hearts. Now you are the one being tested. I watched a pair of birds fly low between buildings and disappear behind a tree. I wished for a second that I could fly the same way. I returned to the table and the evening moved toward its end. We talked about practical things. We set dates and times. We said polite words that carried polite weights. I carried my handbag on my arm and kept my smile small. I thanked them and left with Daniel. In the elevator, Daniel looked at me. Ma, he said softly. I shook my head. It is all right, I said. We will be fine. He pressed his lips together and nodded. He has my habit of saving words until they are useful. At home, I hung my dress over the chair and sat on the edge of my bed. I opened my tin box and looked at the folded paper from the bank. It was proof that half of the down payment on Daniel's house came from my savings. It was proof that I had kept my promise to my son, made on a night of fever when he was small. I folded the paper again and put it back. Love is not less true when it is quiet, but that night my quiet felt like a bruise. The next days filled themselves with wedding plans. There were calls and lists and new small decisions every hour. The mother sent pictures of dresses she thought would be more flattering. They were lovely and expensive. I said, I have a dress. She said, will it be enough? I said, it will be enough for me. There was a silence and then a quick, okay. One evening, I baked bread and took it to their door while it was still warm. I stood there and heard my name through the wood. I did not mean to listen, but when you hear your name from behind a door, your ears open without permission. She seems simple, the father said. We must be patient, the mother said. A softer voice said, Daniel's mother looked like she needed help with the elevator. A quick laugh followed, not cruel, just careless. I stood very still. Then I turned and walked down the stairs slowly, the warm basket in my hands cooling with each step. At home, I ate a piece of the bread at my small table. It tasted like effort and salt. I looked at the ceiling. I wished I had not chosen the old dress. I wished I had let myself be seen as I am. But wishes are not time machines. They are prayers without clocks. The day came when their talk and my patience crossed like wires. The house was tense with plans. The flowers were late. The seating chart looked like a puzzle with missing pieces. The father was on the phone with a tight voice. The mother moved plates like she was playing chess. I stood in the kitchen holding a spoon. Lena walked in, her eyes red at the edges. She said, "Maybe it is better if you go for tonight." She said it quickly, as if the words had been handed to her by someone else. I looked at her and thought of every time I had said to a child, "You can rest now." Even kind words can scr no, I won't say scratch. They can press in a tender place. I put the spoon down, I picked up my handbag. I said, "I will see you tomorrow." She nodded. "Thank you," she said, and touched my arm, a small touch like checking if a pot is still hot. I walked out to the hallway and saw my reflection in the dark window. I looked tired. I looked older than I felt. I got into the elevator and watched the numbers go down. 987. Sometimes life feels like that. You press a button and all you can do is trust the cables. That night I did not sleep much. I made tea and sat by the window. I took out my tin box. I held the photo of Daniel with his missing tooth. I held the bus pass that had carried me through years. I held the bracelet my mother gave me and felt her quiet blessing. Then I unfolded the bank paper. The numbers were not grand, but they were my years gathered. They were my mornings and nights. They were my calloused hands and my careful lists. I thought for a moment of taking the paper to their table and saying, "See, I am not nothing." Then I folded it again. Love does not need to be proved with a stamp. It only needs to be lived. Morning came, thin and pale. I washed my face and made rice. I packed a small lunch and placed it in my bag. I chose my blue dress instead of the faded one. I tied my hair low. I looked at myself and said, "No costumes today. Just you." This is where I will pause, because the next part is where truth walked through a door we did not expect and the room changed its air. But for now, I wanted you to understand the path that brought me to that door. I wanted you to know the weight of my small smile, the reason for the old dress, the sound of a laugh that was not meant to cut and still did. I wanted you to feel the bus seat under me and the tin box in my hands. I acted poor when I met my daughter-in-law's family. They laughed, and I chose to stay soft. I chose to leave a room without slamming a door. I chose to return the next day as myself. That is where we will begin again.